Wait.
Well, they
Set calls. Are you good? Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'll call you up.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to introduce. I'm Tina Fleming. I'm the principal at the high school. Most of you know me. This has been in the planning since like July. We did this last year. We really think it's important to start to share out some vape education, especially at the younger grades. As we go through, we see the symptoms of long-term vape use at the high school, but we really want to start to address middle school and elementary school levels, so we can kind of stop that process before we really have to deal with other levels at the high school. We do recognize that it's an addiction, it's a problem, and that's why we're really happy to partner with Altogether and Dartmouth Health again this year to bring Vape 101 back to us. It is streaming this year, so we will have people joining us online, as well as it'll be on YouTube after the fact. So I welcome Hillary. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Hillary Schuler. I work in the Population Health Department at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in Lebanon. I'm part of the Substance Misuse Prevention and Suicide Prevention team. My colleague Hannah is here as well. We have a few resources on the table, so help yourselves after we're done with our presentation, but we're excited to be here. This is our second time delivering this content, but we did partner with IRS to do this presentation 3 years ago. So excited to be back, and hopefully you get some really fantastic information. Please stop me if you need me to clarify anything. If you have a question, we will have time for questions at the end as well. So I handed out pre and post surveys to folks. This is just a really fantastic opportunity for us to receive feedback as we deliver this presentation. We've done this a number of times for a number of different communities, and this is helpful for us to know if what we're doing is working and if there's anything that we can do to make this a more effective presentation. So this is sort of our outline for what we're going to talk about. We'll get into some Vaping 101, what are vapes. We'll talk about some national and local data. We'll talk about the Dartmouth Health Vaping Toolkit, some conference learnings. We have an opportunity to hear from Valley Court Diversion, and then Officer Bunton here is going to talk a little bit about sort of the legal implications as well. So before we start, because we're live streaming, we're not going to use notepads, but I'd like to hear from those in the room, if you're comfortable, to share a little bit, like, what would you like to know more about, or something that you're concerned with. If anyone feels brave and wants to share something, you don't have to.
Hillary, one of the things, and we deal with it often, there's so many different kinds, and I think last year you introduced some different kinds to us, which was really enlightening. And this year as we work through that process again, I look like things are coming through new, and that as we do, try to support students. So I look forward to that. That's sort of like a question of what you have in there this year.
I have my handy lockbox for a little show and tell. All right, so what is a vape? So e-cigarettes are often referred to as vapes or e-cigs. These are electronic devices that heat a liquid and produce an aerosol that is inhaled into the lungs. Most of these have a battery, a heating element, and a place to hold the liquid. This sort of gives you an outline, a sort of a diagram of what they look. Some of them, we'll go through what others look like. And they sometimes contain really youth-appealing flavors like gummy bear and Skittles. They're very easy to disguise and hide. They're small. People who use vapes breathe and exhale the aerosol that is produced when the vape heats the liquid. So this gives sort of a timeline. E-cigarettes came onto the market around 2007. Most of these delivered nicotine and they were disposable. As you can see, they kind of were designed to look like cigarettes. There have been some variations. These included the e-hookah and rechargeable versions of a vape device. There are vape pens, so these batteries can reach a really high temperature, and they allow users to regulate the frequency of their inhalations. There are mods. These are modifiable e-cigarettes, and these allow for more aerosol, more nicotine, and sort of more of those other chemicals contained in the device to be breathed into the lungs at a much faster rate. And then these at the end, these are pod-based. So these are shaped like USB drives. These are really easy to conceal. It's easy to not know what you're looking at. And these have higher amounts of nicotine than the previous variations. So what do vapes look like? You had a little bit of an idea from the previous slide, but these, from the 2023 National Youth Tobacco Survey, these ones that I'm going to show, these are the most popular that youth have reported using. So the ELF bar, 56.7% of youth report using this type of vape. There's the ESCO bar at 21.6% of use, and the Juul. So I'm going to show you, we have, and I'm putting on a glove because these are kind of gross. So this is what the ELF bar looks like, and if you were close to this box, you would smell, it smells like a candy store over here. They're very fruity, but this is what an ELF bar looks like. And they come in different colors based off of the flavor. This is sort of that Views and ESCO bar type style. Here's some other one. This is an ESCO bar. But as you can see, they're easy to put in your pocket, put in your sweatshirt. And then this is a very small vape. These were all confiscated from places, and they were nice enough to give them to us so we can show everybody what they look like. And then Mr. Fogg, we don't have any Mr. Foggs, but it looks similar to the ELF bar. So on here, can you spot the e-cigarette? From looking at this picture, can you spot a vape device? What letter? What letter do you think? Shout it out.
I
I?
I think all of them.
All of them?
would be
All of them?
pretty much.
These are the vape devices. Is that shocking?
There is a new one out that looks like a Sharpie.
Oh yes, we have a picture of that. Yeah.
We haven't seen that yet, but.
So these are hidden in plain sight. Here's the Sharpie. You can see one that looks like a sweatshirt string or like a fitness watch. So these are small. They're very easy to conceal. And the aerosol that they produce disappears really rapidly once it's exhaled into the air. They can also be modified to look like everyday objects, making these really easy to disguise. So when you think about vape devices, most vapes contain nicotine. A CDC study found that 99% of vapes sold in the United States contain nicotine. And some vape liquids that are marketed as having 0% nicotine do actually contain nicotine. When a person is addicted to nicotine and stops using it, this can result in symptoms of withdrawal. That can include irritability, restlessness, anxiety, depression, some sleeping problems, and people may keep using tobacco products to help relieve these symptoms, leading to a cycle of dependence. And what may start as a social experimentation in youth can really become an addiction, and we'll talk a little bit more about why. Youth e-cig and cigarette use has been associated with mental health symptoms such as depression. So when you think about youth and the developing brain and the effects of nicotine on the developing brain, the part of the brain that's responsible for impulse control and decision making is not fully developed during adolescence. Young people are more likely to take risks with their health and their safety, including the use of nicotine and other drugs. Youth and young adults are also uniquely at risk for long-term, long-lasting effects of exposing their developing brains to nicotine. These risks include nicotine addiction, mood disorders, permanent lowering of that impulse control. And so until about age 25, your brain is still growing. So all through adolescence, all through your young adulthood, your brain is still growing. And each time a new memory is made, a new skill is learned, your brain is creating a synapse or a connection. And in youth, those synapses happen a lot. They happen really quickly. And young people's brains do this at a rapid pace, and addiction is a form of learning. So youth are more susceptible to addiction because their brain is creating these connections a lot faster than adults. And nicotine in e-cigarettes and other tobacco products can prime the adolescent brain for addiction to other substances later in life. So when you think about mental health and addiction, vapes are highly addictive. We just talked about that. Using nicotine in adolescents can really harm that developing brain. It can affect attention, learning, their mood. And what may start as a social experiment can become an addiction as they continue to use. The most common reason US middle and high school students give for trying an e-cigarette is because a friend used them. Yet the most common reason youth give for continuing to use e-cigarettes is I'm feeling anxious, stressed, or depressed. But those are often symptoms of withdrawal. So they're experiencing these symptoms, they continue to use the vape product to combat those feelings, just creating more level of addiction. Current e-cigarette users have double the odds of having a diagnosis of depression compared to those who have never vaped. They are also associated with higher levels of ADHD symptoms as well. In 2020, 20% of youth have vaped cannabis, and many of the youth that we work with in our work have shared that they see many of their peers vaping cannabis now. So it's not just nicotine, they're also vaping cannabis. The use of high potency concentrations like those found in vape pens that we talked about also correlates with a higher incidence of mental and physical health problems and may lead to a higher risk of developing adverse effects such as paranoia, psychosis, respiratory issues, and an increased level of anxiety and depression.
So, can you tell, like, you can obviously smell the odor of the vape. Can you tell the difference if there's been, like, marijuana added to the vape?
I'm not 100% sure. I would imagine if they are vaping cannabis,
It doesn't smell like regular pot, like
Yeah.
old time.
Right,
It doesn't smell anything like that. And even some of these don't have a smell like we, in the past, we've like smelled that. You can smell that sickening sweet smell. Some of them have no smell, and it is, we get alerted with no smell. Like the dab pens, the THC, the cannabis, they don't smell like what we would anticipate. So, like, it's really hard. Like, what we hear more about is the vapor. That is what sort of people are around that they notice that more than anything else. The exhale of whatever it may be.
you can see the vapor, but it doesn't last. It doesn't linger in the air like it does with a cigarette. It disperses pretty quickly, but you can see it when it's exhaled.
Hey, I'm sorry, did you already say if you inhale once, like how many cigarettes is that?
Oh, we're gonna talk
Oh,
about that.
this is,
Right, so you didn't get to that.
That's probably our most shocking slide.
yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss it at the
No,
beginning.
thank you.
That might be your
Oh,
big
yeah,
goal.
it's coming.
I'm sorry, I was late.
That's okay. So I wanted to mention this resource from the Truth Initiative. This is a reputable source of information for those looking to learn more about the effects of vaping on youth. They also have resources around prevention and quitting, so cessation resources. We know in talking with our youth and working with our youth, they're really passionate about their mental health and their mental health of their peers. And so opening up the lines of communication and talking to your kids about their mental health and about how using a substance is not going to increase your mental health, can actually worsen your mental health symptoms, is super helpful. So this is a great initiative, the Truth Initiative, if you want some more information. So vaping was originally introduced as a safer alternative to cigarette use, but safer does not mean that it's safe, right? So we're gonna walk through our lovely shocking slide about how many cigarettes are in an e-cigarette. So, you may or may not know that a standard pack of cigarettes contains about 20 cigarettes. There's about 1 to about 1.2 milligrams of nicotine absorbed from a cigarette. So there's about 22 milligrams of nicotine delivered to a body when you smoke a whole pack of cigarettes. But one Juul pod is about 41.3 milligrams of nicotine, which is equal to about 37 cigarettes.
But one little, whatever they do.
Right. So the whole pod,
Right.
is 37 cigarettes.
So, is there any way to know how much one is? No. Okay.
No,
All right.
I will say, like, in our experience and, some of the anecdotal data that we've heard, youth are using these all the time, and they're going through them pretty quick.
Yeah. The people I've seen, literally every 10 minutes, they're taking a hit
Yeah.
of it, and it's like,
Yep. Yeah.
at least a cigarette, it feels like you have to burn it down, and you understand you're getting a lot of it.
Yeah. So one flume float is about 400 milligrams of nicotine, 336 cigarettes. An Elf bar, which was the most popular that youth reported, that was
The little,
this little guy right here.
How long would one of those last?
Depends on how
Do
often
they
you
have
use
any
it.
idea?
Like,
They have
like
no
somebody
idea.
could go through a couple of them in
Do
a
they?
day?
Maybe not a day, but definitely in a week, depending on their level of addiction.
Holy cow.
590 cigarettes in this little thing. That's a lot of nicotine. This is the slide we show that people are like, whoa. You hear the audible gasps in the audience. And my hand is sticky. So we've talked about nicotine and the health risks associated with nicotine. But aside from the nicotine content, vape use also poses other health risks. So study of vape products report that they contain an average of 6.2 flavoring chemicals, with over 20% of commercial vapes containing flavorings with potential inhalation toxicity risk. Additional studies suggest vape usage may negatively influence cardiovascular health, present risk of obstructive lung diseases, adversely affect brain development, and increase the risk of chronic bronchitis and asthma in adolescents. E-cigarettes contain components that present potential risks for lung, stomach, bladder, and esophageal cancer. And there's ongoing research of electronic cigarette or vapor product use associated lung injury. So they're seeing so much of it that they named it. These symptoms include shortness of breath, chest pain, cough, and airway obstruction. Additionally, studies show a consistent link between current vaping and respiratory issues during adolescence. Scientists are still learning about the long-term health effects of e-cigarettes. As I mentioned on a slide way at the beginning, they were sort of introduced in 2007, which seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. Some of the ingredients in e-cigarette aerosol could be harmful to the lungs in the long term. Some of the flavorings, they might be safe to eat, but they're not safe to inhale directly into your lungs. And the gut can't process more substances than the lungs can. Defective e-cigarette batteries have also caused fire and explosions. I'm sure you all remember the news articles of these exploding on airplanes, catching fire in people's faces or in people's mouths. Children and adults have been poisoned by swallowing, breathing, or absorbing the e-cigarette liquid through their skin or their eyes. And nationally, approximately 50% of calls to poison control centers for e-cigarettes are for kids ages 5 and under. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. So the aerosol is not considered harmless water vapor. The aerosol that users breathe from the device and exhale contain harmful substances, including nicotine, ultrafine particles that can be inhaled deep into the lungs, flavorings such as diacetyl, which is a chemical linked to serious lung disease. There's volatile organic compounds, cancer-causing compounds or chemicals, and heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead. The aerosol that users inhale and exhale from these e-cigarettes expose themselves, but also can expose bystanders to harmful substances as well. So this is a set of interactive slides in regards to third-hand smoke. So we've all heard of second-hand smoke when someone smokes a cigarette and you're breathing in, but this is in regards to third-hand smoke. Has anyone heard of third-hand smoke before?
No.
Some people. So third-hand smoke is a chemical in e-cigarette vapor and the aerosol that remains on surfaces and in dust even after the vapor and aerosol are gone. And they react with other chemicals in the environment to form toxic chemicals that are then re-released into the environment. These potentially harmful chemicals can be exposed to other people or animals through their respiratory system, through ingestions, through skin exposure, and small children are greatly at risk for this because they're always touching things and putting their hands in their mouths and putting other things in their environment in their mouths. So you can see on your couch, your pets can get into it. So this is looking at e-cigarette and liquid nicotine cases in regards to calls to poison control centers. Children and adults, like I mentioned, have been poisoned, and nationally 50% of these calls are for kids ages 5 and under, but you can see the increase in the calls to poison control centers around electronic cigarette and liquid nicotine. Six 6,726 exposure cases about e-cigarette devices as of December 31st of 2022. So outside of vape devices being really easy to conceal, these are really appealing to youth a lot because of really false advertising. They're advertised as having a harmless water vapor, as being safer than cigarettes, but mostly because of these flavorings. Youth are really appealed to these flavorings. As you can see on the screen, there's cookie dough, Candy King, which kind of looks like Sour Patch, Fruit Monster, peanut butter cup, and soda flavoring. There are thousands of flavors of e-juice for refillable vapes, and there are flavors for disposable vapes as well, and these are really appealing to kids, especially our younger kids. A study of 3,174 youth ages 13 to 18 found that peers are a primary social influencer and a reinforcer for vaping. Most teens get their first electronic nicotine delivery system, also called an ENS, from a friend, and they recount their first vaping experience being with friends, and it being a positive experience. Some youth said that they might not have started vaping if their friends didn't vape or if their friends vaped less. Advertising and marketing through social media has a strong association with friends networks, reflected by the fact that these electronic nicotine delivery systems were initially influenced by a friend. They would have been more exposed to these on social media. So their friends post about it, they see their friends post about it, or their friends post a video of them using it. Youth are going to be more prone to follow in their footsteps. So when you consider the prominent role that social media plays in teens and the social networks that teens have, Anti-vaping ads placed in social media channels may have the potential to offset some of that peer influence, but a lot of that comes from the adults. Has anyone heard of Zyn? Seen
Yeah.
Zyn?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard it.
So this is new. Schools in our area have shared some anecdotal evidence about students using Zyn. So these are oral nicotine pouches. And there's a picture. So these also come in a variety of flavors and nicotine concentrations. They resemble mints or chewing gum. They're really subtle. You're not restricted by smoke-free policies that are in place at places. It's not like chewing tobacco. You don't have to spit. And these are just as addicting as the vape devices. But we're starting to see more youth using Zyn because there's no smoke, there's no vapor, and it literally looks like chewing gum.
Is it actual pouch? Like they have to throw something out when they're done?
Yes. Yep.
What does the empty pouch look like?
Yep. Right. You don't have to spit with it like
No,
you
but
do.
what does the empty pouch when they're done look like?
It just looks like wadded up paper, like wet.
More often you can notice you'll notice it at their bottom lip out a little bit.
And because the use of Zyn is new, there's not a lot of information around youth use and the effects of youth using these. So we've talked a little bit about THC and dab pens. In a 2018 study of infrequent cannabis users, Johns Hopkins medicine researchers have shown that compared with smoking cannabis, vaping the cannabis increased the rate of short-term anxiety, paranoia, memory loss, and distraction when doses were the same. So using the same amount of cannabis but vaping it instead of just smoking it increases the rate of these issues, these short-term anxiety and paranoia, memory loss. Adolescents who vape cannabis are at a greater risk for respiratory symptoms. This is indicative of lung injury than teens who smoke cigarettes, smoke marijuana, or vape nicotine. Adolescents who reported vaping marijuana were roughly twice as likely to report wheezing and whistling in the chest than those who did not. The THC that's out there nowadays is way more potent than it was in years past. It's much more dangerous. So looking at some data, which is not necessarily the most fun to look at, but e-cigarettes were the most popular tobacco product used for the 10th year in a row. So every year there's a national youth tobacco survey that goes out. 2.13 million youth currently use e-cigarettes. More than a quarter of middle and high school students use an e-cigarette product every day. More than a third youth e-cigarette users report using e-cigarettes at least 20 of the last 30 days. And the most commonly used device among users were disposables, followed by the pre-filled refillable pods or cartridges. And so the ELF bar, the one that has the 590, that's a disposable. So looking at our local data, so every other year, high school students take the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And this is specific data to the students in the high school here from 2023. 30.4% of students here at MVRHS reported ever using an electronic vapor product. And in the state of New Hampshire, that was a 32.6%. 14.2% of MVRHS students reported currently using an electronic vapor product in the 30 days leading up to taking this survey. And in the state of New Hampshire, it was 16.7%. I will say, looking at the data from 2023 compared to the data of 2021, the vape use has started to trend down at the high school, which is great. But this, I mean, when you think about how small this school is, 14%, that's still a lot of students when you think about the size of the school here. So we conducted some listening sessions with local high schools. We cover the Upper Valley as well as Greater Sullivan County in the work that we do. And these are some of the things that local high schoolers had to say. I'm not going to read all of them. But some students are vaping in middle school and even elementary school. We hear that here too. Some students use substances to cope with mental health, depression, anxiety. There's a lack of understanding that vaping poses health risks or that using vapes with marijuana is still vaping. So what can we do? So at Dartmouth Health, we created a vaping toolkit. So the goal of this was to really have a one-stop shop. We conducted a number of surveys. We surveyed the schools that we work with, we surveyed parents to really understand, like, what do people know about vaping? What would be helpful for them to have when they're talking to their kids about vaping? It contains an overview of some data trends, some health outcomes. There's resources specific for educators and other health professionals. And then there's a separate section just dedicated to resources for parents and caregivers. There's a card on the back table. It's like a little business card with a QR code on it. You can scan that and it takes you right to the Google Doc or the Google Drive that has all of this information, and it's wonderful. And this was updated for this school year. So every year it goes through a process of being updated as we learn of new things. Either new resources come out or we hear from people who have used it and they say it would be great to have XYZ. Or we get some new evidence-based information that we think is worth sharing. So when we look at, in the toolkit, the resources for caregivers and students, there's information about sort of what we talked about, like what is vaping. There's some pictures, there's fact sheets, there's also videos and webinars, and there's also some self-guided cessation resources. My Life, My Quit is a great resource when you look at cessation. There's not a lot of in-person quit options in our area. But there are some fantastic national resources, as well as talking to your primary care physician too. So when we go through this process, we attend conferences and we learn things when we go to conferences. And so this is looking at what's a parent to do. So something called preventative parenting. So Stanford Medicine's Cannabis and Vaping Prevention Conference happens every year. Our colleague Maggie was able to attend that and was able to bring some really fantastic things back. So thinking of this concept of preventative parenting, they talk about adolescence being a learner's permit for life. So you get your learner's permit when you're learning how to drive, and you go through driver's ed and you learn more. Adolescence is your learner's permit for life. You are still learning. Your kids are still learning the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do, what makes them feel happy, what doesn't. And a strong relationship with your child is the key to being an authority figure in their eyes. They put a really strong emphasis on connection first and then direction. So making that connection with your children and then directing them towards the behavior that you want. Don't inflict help or deliver scare tactic messages. I mean, when I was a kid, DARE was a big thing. DARE doesn't work. And so just having those open conversations with your child, regular conversations on your rides to school, on your way to a sports game, on your way home from school, just opening up those lines of communication, and focus on the behavior, not the person. So focus on the behavior that you want to change or that you want to talk about and address, and not the individual person. Attribute successes to effort and competence. So you could say something like, you were faced with a tough choice and you used your brain to make a safe choice, as opposed to, you're so good for not vaping at that party. So you can say the same type of thing, you just change your language a little bit. This is looking at sort of, having impactful conversations and the things that adolescents need. They need fun and excitement, they need to feel like they belong. They also crave that independence and that control. And they're also trying to figure out their identity and their purpose, which I think then leads into them having confidence in themselves. Kids will use what's convenient and what works for them. So explore where they might have deficits in these areas, where the gaps are, and the areas where a vape device or using cannabis might be filling that gap. What are those gaps, and then how do you help address the gaps and fill those gaps without using substances? There's also a wonderful resource from SAMHSA called Talk They Hear You. There's some stuff up there on the table, but this is really sort of a parent-focused media campaign around like, how do you talk to your kids about substances? Not just vaping in general, but all substances, including alcohol. And so this is just a really wonderful tool for parents as well. We do media campaigns using Talk They Hear You. We've done some postcards that go out in the mail to our area, locate or region. Maybe you've gotten one in the past. We didn't do one this fall, but we'll do one again. And it just really talks to parents about how to talk to your kids about some of those hard conversations. These are some 5 conversation goals that you can have with your kids. These are again from the SAMHSA Talk They Hear You campaign. You can be the expert and a good source of information about alcohol and other drugs, so answer the questions that they have. Show that you're paying attention. Build their skills and strategies for avoiding. So just helping them understand, how do you say no to peer pressure? What's something that they can say? Fill their toolbox. It's never too early to talk to your child about alcohol and other drugs. Talk to your children before they're exposed to alcohol and other drugs. Oftentimes that's in elementary school these days. And be direct and honest in your conversations, and have a lot of little conversations. You don't need to fill one conversation with all of this information. You can sprinkle it up throughout. So looking at some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Legislation around things and some of the legal implications around vaping. So in February 2020, the FDA banned the sale of many flavored refillable e-cigarettes. There was a Juul case which prohibited youth marketing. And then in New Hampshire and Vermont, there are clean air ordinances, and cigarettes are now included in that, in the state's definition of smoking. It didn't exist in that before. So, I would love to invite Valley Court Diversion up to talk to you a little bit about what diversion looks like. And then Officer Bunton, if you wanted to come up and talk briefly about sort of the law side of things.
All right, well, hello everyone. My name is Lexis Jarvis, and I work at Valley Court Diversion Programs. I'm the New Hampshire Court Diversion Program Coordinator. So when kids get in trouble with a vape, here or at other schools, they come to my program. Typically, I just get them straight referred, for example, from Matt. And so I'm gonna give you a little bit of a rundown of like what it looks like. So I'll talk with a parent, we'll meet in my office, and my goal with meeting them the first time is to understand like what's going on, like get the whole picture of your child. So that's talking with you guys, talking with the youth, and then I sit down and do assessments. They do a self-assessment called the SBIRT. It talks them about their substance use within the last year. And so it talks about vaping, smoking, tobacco use, marijuana, alcohol, other substances, as well as mental health. And then I do an additional assessment with them called a GAIN, and I get a really good idea of the whole picture of them. Like, what are their struggles? What are they dealing with? What stresses in their life are going on? Because typically they're vaping because of something. Sometimes they start, like I ask, like, why are we vaping? Because I'm stressed about this. School is stressful. Okay, so let's make a solution to these problems of why we're vaping. So I try to get a good look of the substance use. I ask them directly, like, how often are you vaping? What are you vaping? Sometimes they'll tell me where they get it. And then, so after I have this whole assessment meeting with them, I will talk to people at the school, like Ms. Fleming, ask her, like, what are you seeing with this youth? And what a wonderful thing my office does is we have a substance education class in-house that's run by a licensed alcohol drug counselor. So anyone who comes into my program, even if they didn't come to me for vaping or substance use, if they say they ripped a vape one time, in the past year, you have to take my substance education class. It's 3 hours long. The guy's a really cool guy. All the kids love him. I've not had any complaints about Colin, his name's Colin, about Colin's class. And they typically get a pretty good idea of a little bit of the effects, but more about decision making and choices surrounding substances and vaping. And then in addition to that education, we make a contract with the youth. We have a panel with them in the diversion process. And so this is to address why they're here. And so in that, a lot of the times we include research into understanding the substances they're using. So what are the impacts of nicotine on the adolescent brain? How is it going to impact you? Typically they don't know, and then if they can find out and do their own research, they're like, oh, okay. And they have a little bit of a better understanding of that. I connect them to counselors. And then say they come to my program one time for a vape, and then they successfully complete, and then they get caught with another vape at school. Now we're like, what are we going to do now, right? But part of their program is to then see a licensed alcohol drug counselor, and they have to go to the required amount of sessions. So the counselor will do an assessment with them, they go to the amount of sessions, and then that's the end of that. I haven't had a third time, so I can't give you the data on what I would do then, but we would figure it out then. Maybe we'll figure it out when it comes. But I work with them here at Mascoma. I come every other week. I just came this week for the first time this school year, and I'll come every other week going forward. So I meet with my clients then. If they need something between those weeks, we typically call those other weeks too. So I'm really here to support, my clients and the family through the program. And then I hope I don't see them again, but sometimes I do, and that's okay because there's already some rapport built there. But does anyone have any questions about diversion or anything like that?
So I am the principal, as Marie knows. I just want to say we're really fortunate. I've met with a bunch of other schools. I've been to different conferences, and the collaboration we have is really exceptional. A lot of schools don't have the level in the state of New Hampshire collaboration that we have with diversion. So in the past, Lexus and Lindsay, before she joined our team, that collaboration really wraps around students and families. And Lexus goes through her part, and it's more about the whole child. She goes to the release, but they can really wrap around the student is their struggle grades. So then she really looks at that and is able to sort of bridge the gap between family, students, and the school to say, this is what they're struggling with. They really trust her in sometimes a different way. It's not, the principal of the school or even a teacher. So that relationship has been invaluable to addressing some of the needs of our students. And we hope we don't have a third, but if we do, we'll deal with it as it comes. But their additional resources have really supported a lot of students looking at sort of tier 3 level, bringing the community in as well. So I thank you directly, and I'm sure the community thanks you because it's really been important.
Well, thank you, Tina, and also thank you for letting me into the school. So I can just come on in here, I just walk on in, sign in, and then I just get the students.
Yeah, you won't get too far.
But yeah, so I think it's really great. And then sometimes when there are students here that might not have gotten in trouble with a vape, but maybe we're something's going on, they can do a school referral. So they don't have to be legally in trouble to work with them. So I've worked with a couple students that way. Some students will complete the program and then go on to a school referral because they still need some reports so they don't get in trouble hopefully. But I love it, so it's fun. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. Right, Matt?
Good evening. Pretty much everybody knows me. My name is Matt Bunton, and I am the school resource officer for the Mascoma School District. So I cover the high school, middle school, and elementary school. And I can say that I have gotten vapes from all three. So, yep, elementary school. Lindsay and I printed out, there are 3 RSAs here that govern, and it falls under Title 10 Public Health. And these are kind of the guidelines for what I do as a police officer when one of these devices is discovered. First and foremost, as a police officer, I have the authority to do what's called counsel and release on a first offense. That's been sort of gifted to us by the state, where if we encounter a youth that is in possession of that, we can seize whatever it is that they are in possession of, as long as, tobacco products, or e-liquid or e-cigarettes, and kind of wave our finger at them and send them on their way. So typically on a first offense, that's what I will do. If one of those is brought to my attention here or at the middle school, they have to be at least age 12 before the police can start to criminally charge. So at age 12, this is not a family court issue where we deal with it as a juvenile. This goes to circuit court, and they stand in front of the judge in the big courtroom and answer to him as to why they have one of these in their possession. So the big one is RSA 126K6. When you do that, so it's possession and use of tobacco products, e-cigarettes, or e-liquids by persons who have not attained. How old do you have to be to possess one of these? 21. Used to be 18. This statute also, up until a short time ago, I don't forget when they amended it, but did not include e-cigarettes or e-liquid. It used to just be tobacco. It's obviously become enough of a problem now where they've now included that within that statute. So, at age 12, I can write someone a court summons and they show up with their parents in the Lebanon Circuit Court and explain to Judge Teddy why they had one of those. If he finds them guilty, it's a $100 fine plus 20% penalty assessment. So, that's fairly expensive. A second or subsequent offense is double. So, somebody that paid $25 for one of these things is now going to pay 4 times the amount if they get caught. So we as law enforcement definitely have some discretion in how we deal with this. And so Lexus hears from me frequently. If I have a first offense, and that goes in our, that gets documented in our records management system. So we are dispatched by the Hanover Dispatch Center, who dispatches for a number of towns in the Upper Valley. So if I find someone in possession of a vape here in Canaan, and then they happen to be in Hanover, and the Hanover police catch them with one, and they look up that individual's name, they're going to see in there that, oh, he's already had one. Looks like Canaan PD let him off with one a month ago, 2 months ago. So they're probably going to take action against that. So that sticks with you until until you're legal age to possess one of those things. So I catch a freshman or an 8th grader, you've got the next 7 years to not get caught with one. That's a long time. And that system's, when that information isn't going to go away, it's not going anywhere. So, good record keeping is going to be beneficial to that as well. The other one that I don't use this statute as much. But 126K7, so it's use of tobacco products, devices, e-cigarettes, or e-liquids on public educational facility grounds. So that's another one that we can also, law enforcement can also use. If there's a parent that's driving in here in their car to pick up a kid and they've got one and they're using it, they can't do that. And that's the same fine schedule for, for possession of one. So it's $100 plus 20% penalty assessment. So those are the two, legally, that's what I can do as far as getting them into court. Typically, first offense, counsel and release. Second offense, we don't start with a clean slate at the beginning of the school year. If you had one last year and, we're now in the 24-25 school year, it's not a clean slate when we come back to school. That's going to continue on. So a second offense, that will typically result in a referral to Valley Court Diversion. So, I will get my reports typed for that, let Lexus know that this is going to be coming her way, and then she takes over from there. So we have had occasions where, we do have a third offense, which would be a second, offense that we would deal with in the legal system. And typically, I think depending on some of the circumstances surrounding it, the attitude of the individual that has been caught with that will determine whether or not I decide to, forward that. If they're still currently enrolled in diversion, typically I just say, you know what, we're going to just roll this into your current case, and we're going to keep going. And generally, we don't see it happen again. Sometimes we do, and that's when I'll issue, a summons, or, if the person that's currently in diversion, because they violated their contract, their case gets sent back because they're not maintaining, what they need to be doing for that contract. If that gets sent back to me, then I have no choice but to issue a summons. So those are there for the taking if anybody wants them. Does anybody have any questions? It's a lot of information. No? Good.
Thank you.
Well,
So just to wrap up, if anyone wants to share, did any of this information surprise you? And what else might be useful to know? Yeah.
I was really shocked about the amount of cigarettes, the nicotine as in each device.
Yeah.
That's awful.
But you're dealing, so you've got, just like Hillary said, you're dealing with a juvenile brain.
Right.
Even if you tell them that's 533, there's no real direct connection for them to understand the consequence of that. It's more of explaining to them from the perspective of, and we have these conversations, and we have it even as a staff here at the high school, the symptoms of it, that is more the direction that we sort of need to go, the lens of it.
Right.
Yes, we can look at the preventative lens, which is really key, like ideally, but then once they're doing it, how do you help them recognize the downside of it? And a lot of it is mental health, and like Hillary just mentioned, the key thing of that is they continue doing because of they feel it helps with anxiety. Well, the anxiety is sort of part of the addiction component, so it becomes a very vicious cycle, and stopping is a whole nother issue. And Hillary and I, we have had that conversation of supports, because it's hard. It's really hard. And
I know that in class I reflect a lot on the adolescent brain. It's not fully developed. We still got a lot of work to do, and I'm going right into decision making the end of this week, so just keep telling them. And I ask them, how old? Hopefully 25.
And a lot of, pre-COVID, a lot of things to sort of, addressing nicotine and, other symptoms of, using substances, it's going to cause lung cancer. Kids don't think about that. They don't care about that. That's very long term for them, and they aren't thinking about that. They are thinking about how it's going to make them feel right now. And so framing, the conversations, if you have someone who's really into sports, talking about how this is going to affect the way that they play the game, the way that they play the sport that they love. Like, they need to understand the effects that this has on the current, and not necessarily the long term. They don't think about that. Yeah.
Did you show a picture of what the dab pens look like?
I did not show a picture of what the dab pens look like.
So they're similar, not in the larger ones. They tend to look similar to a pen, like more of sort of like the second or third. You said it was like a fuse or something, or a flume. They tend to look more like that. There's another one. Do you have the pen one?
They're pretty slender and some
Yes.
they're like clear.
Yes.
They're probably like this actually, and they're
So that's a
really
pot,
clear.
that's a
This is-
cartridge.
Somewhat.
Right.
Yep.
And it's a very like
I think I have a
yellowish viscous
Fluid.
fluid that's
Yeah.
in there.
and it usually smells
Like,
like THC.
It does, we'll have a slight.
in our high school, the cop used to bring marijuana and let us smell it, so.
But
you're gonna bring
doing
us
that, it
some
doesn't
gas?
smell like that though, it's not like the
It's got a-
typical.
what I'm
it's
saying,
different,
do you
but
have
it's almost like
a smell?
chemically. Okay,
I-
I got a
so-
chemical.
Dab pens, we don't, so dab pens are automatic police referral, we
Yeah.
don't even,
But you could bring us one to smell at some point, or no? Maybe. I could stop by your house, I'm kidding.
so, yes, dab pens, when we confiscate dab pens, it's automatic, because it's illegal in the state of New
And I
Hampshire,
want to
so.
come up after and smell the other two, because I don't know if they smell it.
My car smells like this box currently.
My cabinet in my office, until I can turn it over, smells like that, you can just open my cabinet. It's distinctive.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to note too is I know that they have batteries, and then like the dab pen, like there's a cartridge that they screw on. So these two things can like take it out like battery. It might not have a cartridge on it, but it can still, be later used with a cartridge. Does that make, you know what I mean? So
Just as an old lady, I use the bathroom a lot, so I'm always wondering.
I think it's to educate yourself, right, is the best way to know like what you're smelling or seeing, because they're very.
That's
I mean,
why I
when all
think-
this first started happening, companies were making hoods with like vapes in the like I could have a vape in this essentially.
Right.
So they're
Does that still go out? Kids still use
I
it?
think you can get them. I think people are sort of like, but
Yeah, the
the
fads.
fad is that's like a little bit over, but for a while like
Just
kids
put
were
them
wearing
in their
hoods and no
sleeves
one
now.
knew.
And they're disguised as pretty common items too, some of them will look like a highlighter, so,
Yep.
if you,
Yeah.
if, Rick and Tina are going through a kid's bag and the kid has a highlighter, give it a twist, they're always coming up with new
So the
ways
end would
to,
look different.
So
to
I
hide
open
things.
mascara,
Okay.
Yeah,
it just,
that's pretty much what a dab pen looks like, is a mascara thing, they're about that size.
Any other questions or things anyone wants to share?
I think people just need to understand from the school perspective, at least for me, we understand that it's addictive, but we also understand that we have district policy, which we follow, but really we understand that we want to change behavior. So this isn't always a suspend a kid out of school for 5 days or, send a kid to court. This is really about changing behavior. And I appreciate you coming because having started the conversation and continuing the conversation with families and now it's streamed can continue that. But really, we often look at a consequence of out of school and in school suspension because there's all kinds of statistics to show now that a student that is vaping due to anxiety, then sits home in vapes, and then that's continued. You've pulled them out of our school community. You've disconnected from the support system that we have at school. So we almost always do a combination of in school and out of school. So we can wrap around them while they're on in school. Students get support, they get structured study hall. We have people check in with them. So that's the important part of what we do. It's not just a consequence. We recognize that it's a problem and how do we support them? And, if it comes to diversion, it's diversion. If it's, maybe the social worker supporting some other pieces, but we don't believe in just consequence out of school. It's just not how we work here. We want to take care of kids.
I have another question. So I know with THC, there's a reaction so that you feel good. With the nicotine, is that the same thing? Like there's something that makes you feel good? Okay. I've never smoked, so I know these things.
So there's resources on the table. Feel free to take anything or everything. The little black bags with the blue on them, so those are deterra bags. So if you have expired, unused, unwanted medication in your home, you can follow the directions on the back of a deterra bag to safely dispose of that medication. A lot of the work that we do is trying to reduce access that youth have to substances, so getting things out. October 26th, I think, is National Prescription Drug Take Back Day. And so that's a national event where local police departments, Kane and Enfield participate, have medication drop boxes. So if you have expired unwanted medication, you can bring all of that and dispose of it in a box at the PD, and it goes and gets incinerated with DEA. So if you can't get there and you would like a deterra bag, please feel free. But anything that you can do to sort of get substances and reduce access to substances in your home is a great sort of prevention tactic.
Sure. And our drop box is available all the time, not just on drug take back days.
Is that inside or outside of the building? I mean, does the public have access to just drive up and drop it off, or do we have to wait for you guys
No,
to
you have to
open?
come in.
Or-
You have to come in, it's in the lobby.
It's in the lobby,
Yeah,
okay.
you don't have to see that, but you have to go in the.
Yeah.
Lebanon's
Okay.
too,
I just-
right?
Yeah.
Pretty sure Lebanon
Leb-
is open.
Lebanon PD has one too.
Yep.
And I think it's right outside dispatch, so you can actually walk in and just get off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you, Matt, do you have a sharps in your lobby? Sharps
We do,
container?
yep.
Yeah. So if you have sharps too, you can dispose of.
Thank you so much, Hillary, for coming. We'll continue to connect because this collaboration has gone on for a few years, and we'll continue to do that. I appreciate you coming. And if families have questions, as you know, after they watch the stream, they can email me or Hillary as well. I can connect anybody with Hillary. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. So if you want to, didn't realize that. Those are my kids. On the back of your paper is the post survey. It would be great if you could do that, and then you can just leave them, and I will collect them. Thank you very much.
Self-help is required.
Shots for shadow.